Welcome to Sit and Stay, the podcast that breaks down the challenges of starting and maintaining a mental health practice into digestible chapters. Sit and Stay is presented by RipsyTech, an electronic health record company committed to addressing the mental health crisis in the United States.
Hello and welcome back to the Sit and Stay podcast brought to you by RipsyTech. I am RipsyTech Product Manager Parker Anderson, and as always, I am joined by my favorite co-host, founder and CEO of RipsyTech, Tom Tarshis. Hi, Tom.
Hey, Parker. Like the introduction without the coming up with the new adjective to try to describe. So,
I was thinking about, I don't know if you saw the wheels turning in my head. I was thinking, what adjective am I going to say? And I was thinking of saying something like, the best performing podcast host around, Tom Tarshis, something along those lines. My favorite co-host. So, Tom, in our last episode, we talked about the big picture of ownership and partnership in mental health practices. And today we are picking up where we left off with a second part. And this time around, we wanted to get into some of the more nuts and bolts, talk a little bit more specifically about how ownership can be structured and, what to plan for if you're considering, allowing employees to come on some kind of ownership track. So let's dive in and let's talk about it. I suppose my first question for you is just going to be, what are some specific ways you can give employees, in this case, clinicians, a path to ownership at a company, a mental health practice?
Yeah. And I was feeling, sometimes I feel frustrated when the podcast is maybe a little too general or philosophical. And I'm definitely a person who likes to give more direct and specific examples and completeness around items. And that was the feeling I was getting yesterday. And I will say, Parker, my goal for this podcast, as I was just listening to one of our previous ones and being harshly self-critical of my performance, is to see if I can keep my speed and momentum up a little bit and make it flow a little more smoothly. As I was telling you, in general, sometimes I feel like I pause too much because I'm overly concerned with making sure I don't misspeak, and I can just do better at saying quickly, I'm not an expert on this, but here it is. And anyway, so that's my performance note. See how we do.
This is exactly why I said, high performing podcast co-host at the beginning. I was trying to hype you up, Tom. Well, here I am, ums and likes. Get them out of your system now. There's going to be more of them, and it's fine. Here we go.
Let's good. Yeah. Let's do it. So I think, there's two classes of employees that are going to come into any clinic. One are just people who are happy there to be working, and we'll keep this in the context of a mental health clinic, but happy to be working in the clinic, seeing patients or working the front desk, and don't necessarily have any sights set on ownership for the company. And so let's talk. I wanted to talk about some options there first. This is the same sort of thing where if you go to work for a tech company, Google, or really for any company that's on the stock market, and lots that aren't listed on the stock market, it's a cool perk to know, like, hey, I have 100 shares of Apple, and that's going up in time, and there's all these cool options around the stock. So, hey, can we do that for mental health clinic employees also, to get that same sort of feeling of, and we talked about this last week, ownership and pride and motivation to work a little bit harder, and as an employee retention tool. So let's talk about two specific examples here. And we'll talk about some more. So I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an accountant. I want to, the things I'm providing are, I think, examples of things that I know people do, and I know a little bit about them. The asterisk and caution is CPOM, corporate practice of medicine, can throw wrenches into things by having to come up with little extra complex design to some of these items. For example, You might need an MSO or managed services organization in order to do some of these plans or pay out some of the things or set up some of this ownership. For example, you can't really give ownership to a corporation by physicians or other allied health professionals because it's outlawed in all the states that don't allow corporate practice of medicine. So what you can do though is give ownership to this MSO or managed service organization that provides some services to the company. It's a very confusing thing.
Yeah.
I'll say lawyers know how to do this. So ultimately the guide here is, whatever you want to do, there is a way to do it, but you want to be very careful and make sure you're doing it within the correct legal confines, especially for the corporate practice of medicine states. That's my disclaimer.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, and perhaps that's why we pay the lawyers the big bucks.
Correct. All right, so let's go to the first structure to talk about, which is a yearly bonus that the clinic sets a policy that 10% of the yearly bonus goes to its employees, and the employees have, we can call it ownership. And this is the shares that if you own the stock in a company that paid out dividends each year, this would determine how much money you get paid out. So it's not a traditional buy shares and keep them till you leave, which we'll talk about that structure next, but it's the company has decided to give X% of profits to the employees. So each employee, how that 10% is split up, that's the rewards to the employees based on different things. And we'll talk about that in a second. And then each year, based on your quote ownership, that determines your share of the bonus pool for how your clinic did. It's part one. Let me pause. Go ahead.
Well, you say 10%. Is that 10%? 10% of what? I guess is my question.
Yeah, so 10% of the profit for the company. So,
okay, and that gets divvied up to people kind of based on how much ownership stake they have, or
yeah,
I'm using kind of a broad term of just so somebody might be entitled to more of that 10% than somebody else based on and that's kind of what you said we'll get into in a second, and that could be based on different things.
Correct. And the reason I threw 10% out is it's not uncommon for a full C corporation. For example, RipsyTech, which is a C corporation. So out of RipsyTech's 10 million authorized shares, 1 million of those are put aside for employee ownership. So it's not uncommon to say, there's the owners who've invested or done other financial contributions or roles, and you always save shares to bring someone in later. But a good company will set some amount of their shares that this is the pool of ownership. We're going to give 10% of ownership of the company to just our employees who've been hardworking and we care about. So that's, yearly bonus for a mental health clinic. You made this much money. We're giving that 10%. Not exactly, but essentially, it's a similar mechanism to 10% of the employees own shares in your other company. And so then, Parker, to your question of, this would be, and people can think about, if you've been at a company for a long time, maybe you get X shares each year. There is an option. The difference there is you can go and buy extra shares on the stock market or things like that. But for the purpose of this example, I'd say the most common way people are rewarded is for time spent at the company. If you are willing to take on a leadership role, maybe supervising other clinicians, something that doesn't give you rights, and you're not interested in rights around direction of the ownership of the company, but hey, Parker, to be a clinical supervisor and take care of these 10 people, that's going to get you another 0.2%. It's up, 1 million shares sounds better because you're using whole numbers to divvy it up, but percents, you can make a small percent as possible. So yeah, leadership role, how long you've been with the company. And then the important thing here is that bonus inherently is based on how the clinic did, because it's 10% of the profits. If the clinic lost money, then there's no distribution coming out. If the clinic did very well, then there's money coming to people. One thing you cannot do is, hey, Parker, you killed it by working extra hours, so I'm giving you extra ownership stake, extra percent of the profit sharing, because you get in trouble with kickback laws. And again, I'm not a lawyer, but in general, this sort of profit sharing plan shouldn't be based on individual level sales performance or revenue generation. And then I'm sorry, I'm piling a lot on, but the last comment there is, this is different from, you have a work expectation and every quarter you give a bonus in the employee's pay because they met their work expectation, and you have a set plan that all employees are eligible for, that if you based on whatever metrics, that if you exceed what you're expected to, here's a bonus check.
Okay, so an employee can get a bonus for their performance, but it cannot be tied to something like their ownership stake in the company.
Right. Or some sort of ownership stake, or anything that rewards employees for how the business has been doing, or for a model like this, or for shares towards ownership stakes. But if that makes sense.
Maybe not. Maybe we can say like one more time in like the cleanest way possible, if you can think of like 2 sentences.
Yeah. So whereas you can have a consistent policy to give people bonuses if they exceed expectations, if they see way more patients than they're supposed to, you can work out a bonus system where they get rewarded for that. However, for things like ownership in a company, or something like paying out a bonus based on how well the company did, that should not be tied to individual sales, or in this case, like patient care and money generated by patient care. It needs to be tied to things like how long you've been with the company, leadership role, and just, the bonuses on overall company performance.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, great episode. Let's end it right there. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so yeah, we've talked about. I know that we talked about, there's maybe like multiple ways, and you mentioned four different ways of doing things. Are we at one? Are we at two? How many?
Yeah, so this is still the first one, although
still the first one. Okay.
And I think a couple other topics that relate to each of these is, one, vesting. And we may have even talked a little bit about this last week, but this is, for example, in this first model, right? The idea of, you very easily can set a model where, hey, you don't get any payout till you've been with the company X number of years, and that could be anywhere from 1 to 5 years theoretically. So for every model we talk about, you set up a vesting structure, and people, it used to take 3 or 4 years. Sometimes people say make it 1 year because that's for the employee retainment, or makes it something that's more reasonable. But all the things we talk about should have some type of vesting plan that is discussed. The other thing that's important for all of these models is what happens when the employee leaves, or what are buyout options. For this first one, it's sort of straightforward. Like, if you leave the company before the bonus payout period, then you're not going to get your bonus payout for that year. And you can have other clauses as well, where if you quit the day after you get your bonus, you could do you could put anything in the language, right? That, the payout comes 90 days later, in order to prevent people from quitting, just trying to hang on and quit after day one, the day after they're eligible. That being said, if you don't know that someone's about to quit after they're going to get their bonus, you're maybe not doing a great job with your company or that employee, and you should be aware of that.
Yeah. Okay. You're answering a lot of my questions before I have a chance to even ask them. So,
well,
very thorough so far. Well-performing podcast host.
You're just making me nervous. Like, anyway.
Okay.
See, and I smacked the microphone. Okay, but let's go to
continue.
Yeah. So that in that model, there is this yearly bonus that people get, and that doesn't compare directly to owning stock in a company. You do get dividends each year, but that's not the main value of the stock. So what's something that's more like owning a stock? And that would be something, set up as often it's called phantom equity, because a lot of the clinics are not set up as C corporations, but they're set up as LLCs, or things that go with percent ownership. But what you can do is create a phantom share structure where you could say, hey, here's 1 million shares, phantom shares. They're not real except on paper. And you're going to be able to earn these shares through time you're at the company. Again, it can be for a leadership role. You're going to decide how those shares are given out. You can even go so far as letting, just like a regular stock, your employees can purchase some of these phantom shares to get more, quote, ownership in the company. And then as the company does well, right, people hold on to their stock. And then how is that worth anything? Well, at different points, the company is actually required to buy back the shares that people would sell. So you can't go on the stock exchange and sell these phantom equity shares, but you can go to the company and say, hey, I'd like to sell 10,000 of these phantom shares I have, and take that payout now.
And okay, so you can build those up over time, but also you can you sell those back at any time while you're an employee, or does it have to be like when you're leaving?
Yeah, so you can be while you're an employee, and definitely when you leave, the company is obligated to buy back those shares.
Okay.
I'm waiting for the logical question to follow potentially, which is, so for Google, we have this stock market ticker that gives us the value of what that stock is worth at every moment in time.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So how do you value how much those shares are worth?
Great question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, this is, if you're going to do this, you need to have good records and a consistent system for evaluation of your company. You also need to know that all these shares that are issued, that is payable debt for your company.
Right.
So, you don't want to be sloppy, issue too many shares, value them too high, everyone quits, and you don't have money to pay people out. That is big trouble. So the key to this, there are things called 409A valuations. They can be done multiple ways, where people come in and look at financial records, growth, sales, and that can put an overall valuation on. It's one way to get a valuation for what shares would look like. As I'm saying this, I realize I'm not sure it's even called a 409A valuation for something like phantom shares. The more reasonable thing people do is maybe once a year they look at their EBITDA. Have you heard that term, Parker?
EBITDA?
EBITDA.
EBITDA. That's no.
EBITDA.
Wait, what? EBITDA?
DA. It is a very, very common accounting and financial term. It stands for can I do it? Earnings before income taxes, depreciation.
Oh, okay.
This is depreciation and amortization. So it's a way to
It makes
looking
way
at.
more sense that it's an acronym. I was like, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
There's no
Oh,
Latin roots going on in this word. I don't like. I was so confused. Okay.
yeah,
Got
yeah.
it.
Sorry. And EBITDA is what, if you were going to sell your practice at some point to private equity, don't do that. But no, maybe do that. Whatever. It's your company. If you were going to do that, what they'll usually do is look at this EBITDA, which is kind of gross profit before taxes and a bunch of other accounting stuff. And then, okay, if the company made $1 million last year, they might say, okay, we're buying out your company. We're going to pay you 10 times that because we're going to hold the company for 10 years and we can do better than you. But it's a way that you can put a valuation on a company. And so you can use your EBITDA as one target measure for how to value what the shares are worth. And this, ultimately, this is your company decision to decide what to do. Just being careful around, making sure you realize these are debts, these phantom shares, and that you need to be able to pay them off at any time. But using your EBITDA, having clean accounting records, maybe once a year, the value of those shares reset based on the earnings. You could bring in like overall assets of the company as well if you wanted to bring that in. And again, I think anything is possible. The lawyers can draw up anything, but the key pieces are to give out these phantom shares. You have to have a consistent way to say what they're worth and be ready to pay them out at any time. And then you still also set a vesting schedule and things like that. For something like this, it's, maybe you get 25% after 1 year, they're 50% vested after 2, it versus just a bonus at the end of the year system. This, I think, many people have a more traditional 4 or 5 years to fully be able to cash out your shares.
Yeah, you mentioned there's 4 ways. Are we at 2? Are we?
Yeah, so that was 2. I wanted to do 2 sort of ideas if you just have employees, and then let's talk about 2 ways for people who are interested in like more of a partnership or getting big chunks of ownership with or without decision-making power. But in general, this would be decision-making power likely to be included if someone's coming in to take a big chunk of ownership in the company.
Okay. Then
so
continue.
Example, Parker's positive Pokemon practice has been doing great in Georgia.
Okay, continue.
Yeah, that's on my mind because in our other podcast, I talked about the Pokemon poster in your background, and we had a little dialogue about it.
Something about Pokemon cards, actually, which I'm not a big person for Pokemon cards, but yes, there is a poster that the viewer cannot see that is in my room. Anyway, continue.
I just wanted a
Parker's
cool name
Pokemon practice in Georgia.
For your mental health clinic. And so, yeah, you've been rolling along. You're up to 25 employees. Maybe you're the sole owner, and your good friend quit their last job, and they're like, "Hey, Parker, let's be partners." Let's say that this friend has been doing well, and they say, "How much will it cost me to buy 25% of the practice?" So this is model number 1, which is people coming in and investing a large, I shouldn't say large, but giving cash in order to purchase their initial ownership rights and shares to your company. And then figuring out after that initial, how much of the company do they get for the initial purchase, and then figuring out moving forward, are there going to continued shifts in ownership percentage and planning around that? Does that make sense? Yeah. So, sort of on some level, this is very logical. Like, you're doing well. Yeah, you could use a cash infusion. Happy to bring on a friend. Happy to share some of the business operations. Bring someone else in to take care of some of the risk. But so let's say your practice has generated $500,000 a year
Mm-hmm.
for the last 10 years.
Okay.
Based on what you just learned about EBITDA and other valuation metrics, how much would you charge your good friend for 25% of your company?
I fully accept that I could be getting this wrong. So, um, and I have no shame in it. I'm just gonna go ahead because I am doing my best as the non-expert here to follow this as much as possible because I don't, frankly, I'm not a business expert. So this is all a lot for me. I spend my days thinking about Pokemon. Clearly, just kidding, kind of. So I'm just gonna say, well, you mentioned a few numbers there. You mentioned 25%, you mentioned 500,000, and you mentioned 10 years. So I don't know. Gosh, can I say 500,000, just 500,000, multiply it by 10, and then divide it by 4, and to come out to what is that, like $1.25 million? Would that be how much they would need to spend?
If that was your price, that
Oh,
would be
so I'm setting the
it,
price.
you are setting the price. So, right, your company's earned $5 billion over the last 10 years. And so you're saying, sure, you can have 25% of the company for 1.25 million. That would be being a very good friend and maybe not the best business decision, because
Okay.
that's a very face value. Like, you're not giving yourself anything extra.
Right, and it's not taking into account like the potential worth of the business.
Like, you've been cranking out great profits already, right? If you were selling to private equity and your EBITDA was 500,000 a year, you would be fighting for 10 or 20 times that amount. So,
Okay.
right, that would be 5 million to 10 million.
Right.
But but maybe you really maybe you really want this person. The point is, it goes back to this sort of thinking about the value of your company. It's mainly based on profitability. Maybe that your 7 best clinicians are leaving in February, so you're going to bring them in. Usually there are complex legal agreements that have lots of stuff around this in it to protect both parties, even if you're good friends. But yeah, it's a negotiation. You're going to come up with a number, and you guys are going to talk about it.
Yeah, I guess what never ceases to surprise me in the business world is how much of it is strategizing around people and behavior, and a little bit of politics, a little bit of, yeah, just well, I guess strategy is the right word, but like, and I really mean strategy. I'm talking like chess kind of strategy. It's interesting. It is really interesting. Um, okay, keep
Yeah, and
going.
so yeah, and these models, the other couple specific things is, in general, the second someone comes in, they are that percentage owner with all the rights and responsibilities and decision making powers. There is typically like a clawback or repurchase period built in to protect the person from selling. That if maybe it's up to 3 years, maybe it's 1 year, maybe it's 5, that if the new owner does something wacky or illegal, sexually harasses your employees, that you can kick them out and buy them out of the business. So, for a number of listed reasons. So you're going to have this clawback period that you can kick the new owner out at any time. It is another
Can we define clawback? Like, I think I'm maybe having a hard time with that part, because you've mentioned like anti-clawback laws, but then we're talking about
anti-kickback laws.
Kickback. Oh my God. Okay. So, okay. All right. This one's on me. This is my bad.
Soccer for kickback, bear claws for claw. No, I don't.
Okay. Clawback, good.
My enunciation
or
wasn't
clawback,
good.
fine. That's my fault. Clawback is okay. Kickback, not so okay. Gotcha.
There you go. Yeah, a claw. So it can be you've got this ownership, but you're not. You can be kicked out at any time, and you can buy it back, and they're not allowed to sell it to anyone else as well. And I think in general for these models, most of them do have. So theoretically, after this time period, say your friend dies and that ownership goes to their spouse, and the spouse says, "I'm selling right now. Give me my, whatever the shares are worth, but it's been a really bad year and you actually can't pay out the agreed upon rate for the ownership," or there are these other sort of scenarios. So the other thing that's often in these deals is, if you die, the immediate buyback goes to the company. That you still have to do a buyout, but you're not giving ownership to someone that you don't want to have as a partner or involved with the business.
So that's something that you would have to kind of like preemptively get into the legal terms.
Yeah, and then often the partners of people in these deals have to sign legal forms also allowing this.
Oh, that's interesting.
And it's less actually about as I think about the payout example, like depending on there are other things to go into the business where, like, if say the business is valued at $10 million, but the only way you would actually be able to get the money to pay out 2.5 million is to sell the whole business. Like, you don't want that to happen, right? So you have to put in these other terms in the agreements around, you can't die and it go to a family member and they demand payment and I have to sell the company, right? So you want to be very thoughtful and careful. And this is why the lawyers get the big bucks to think about all of these pieces to protect the business you've built.
Okay. Are we on, was that the fourth one?
That was 3.
Was that the third one? I thought so. I continue.
The fourth one is similar, right? So the only thing that's different,
I guess, just for clarity, can we give a label to the first 3 that we've talked about so far?
Yeah. So number 1, which is for rewarding employees, we can call it a profit sharing bonus pool.
Okay.
So based on how the company does each year, there's a bonus pool. It goes out to employees based on their, quote, shares that they have towards the bonus pool. Number 2 is a phantom equity or stock appreciation rights model, which closely approximates what owning a stock in a company would be, where you can sell them at any time to the company to get money and you can cash them out when you leave. So those were the first 2. Number 3, we will call a traditional equity buy-in path to partnership.
Okay.
So someone came and wrote you a check. I love that question, Parker. That was very good for organization. And
yeah, suddenly all the information you just said, I'm like, it just, oh, okay. Wait, yes, I have actually digested all of this and understood it so far. Okay, so let's hit the fourth one then.
Yeah. So make sure at the beginning of the podcast, say, make it to the 28, whatever minute mark we're at, like, it'll all be clear. Right. Okay. And then number 4, last one to talk about is a sweat equity path to partnership. And Parker, what would an earn in sweat equity path to partnership? How is that different from number 3?
Sweat equity is based off of like work that you do, right? Just earning your way in through just pure hard work. I guess that would be my perhaps naive way of defining that.
No, that you are accurate, and this is common, especially for physicians where maybe you've just finished your training. You don't have $1.25 million to buy into anything. Instead, you have $500,000 in student loans. But Parker, you know your friend is a star and a good person and a hard worker, and you want them to come work for you so much and give a leadership role that you're going to put together a proposal where they can, yeah, put in sweat equity or hard work and through that get high ownership percentages. Okay. And what that might look like is, again, it's a longer vesting period for the ownership, like 3 to 5 years. It can be, hey, you're going to, be the chief financial officer, the chief people officer. You're going to supervise all of these people. And by successfully completing these leadership roles that Parker, you knew if you were hiring 3 people to do that, it would cost the company $300,000 a year. So your friend is going to actually be seeing patients and do these other roles that save the company money. Again, this is all like negotiation or what feels fair for how much ownership can they earn each year through this extra work, and what will that path look like?
Okay, so you're kind of quantifying it through the responsibilities of this individual and how much those things are worth to the company.
Yeah, and you can do a mixed model also where there's some credit for responsibilities and tasks, and then in addition, as each year goes by, there's an option for, as people are getting paid and then do have some money, instead of giving the 1.25 million all up front, they're going to give 50,000 a year. But there can be a cash metric piece as well. Right? And this goes back to that theme that anything is possible. It's all a negotiation, but there are models where it's just, you're going to sort of take these extra roles that help the company, and because of that, it's worth X% a year of ownership up to a cap. And there could be models where you're going to do all this, and then after the second year, if you pay X based on our valuation, then you can actually have an extra 5% or however you want to do it.
Okay.
In that model, the previous model, you're writing this big check, that ownership is immediate, right? In this model, with this graded plan, that ownership might not come at all till year 5. So you're putting in all this hard work and some cash, but you are not actually granted that ownership till you've been with the company 5 years.
Okay, that actually makes a good amount of sense. Okay, I have a question that's maybe, I want to make sure you're kind of wrapped up with the 4 ways of providing ownership before I ask this question. Are you?
I think we got sort of 2 of the most common for each of these groups. There are probably 15.
Okay.
There are, many other paths and ways to do these things, but I feel like I know clinics that have done each of these situations. So I feel good getting a little more specifics out to our listeners to give them some ideas about what that might look like for their own clinic.
Okay, so that actually you kind of got at the question that I wanted to ask, which I feel like somebody listening to this who's thinking of starting their own practice, or maybe they're a few years into running their own practice and they're thinking about these things, and they might be listening to you, and I guess my question is just like, how do you know all of this? Like, do you know all of this from just your flat out experience of running companies and having to, like, did you kind of just figure it out as you went, or, you know, what was your way of like learning this information in and being able to like wield it in that moment, and, you know, you just figure it all out? Like, did you kind of just figure it out as you went, or did you like secretly, do you have an MBA I don't know about? You know, like what, yeah, how did it all get there in your brain?
You know, Parker, I think like with lots of that information in my brain, it's 20 years since well, it's actually 30 years since I formed my first company and 20 years since my first mental health company. So I think it's just stuff that I've been exposed to and learn about. And as you know, I had some dealings with private equity and I have good friends who are MBAs. And so it's been just right. I think I've started 6 companies in my life. And so you've learned about these different things and learned by mistakes and other pieces. And so it is just tucked away there in the hypothalamus. And you learn more every day. And so that's why,
Yeah.
you know, be kind, humble, and work hard is my mantra. So I try to make sure I asterisk things. And even if I feel like I'm 100% sure something's right, I try to never say that, because no one is ever 100% right.
Right.
Yeah. So I've just come across all of these and over the years.
Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah. Um, yeah, and perhaps the next person will, in 20 years, say, you know, yeah, I learned a lot of it from experience, but what really got me started was listening to this podcast by these guys at the Sit and Stay podcast, by
I,
RipsyTech.
I thought you were gonna say like, oh, I just asked my AI built-in brain transmitter, and it.
Oh, well, sure. I mean, yeah, but they'll be asking they'll be asking for the source from the AI, and it'll be like, well, here's this podcast from 2025 that provided a lot of really good information. That
I will say on the topic of AI, for anyone interested in one of these models,
Yeah.
AI, to save yourself some money, you can go to a lawyer and say, this is what I want. Can you design it? Or you could go to AI and say, this is what I want. Can you give me some options? And you could get a head start on bringing your document to a lawyer and saying, how's
Yeah.
this look? And save yourself thousands of dollars.
I mean, I think that's a really good suggestion in general. You know, like save yourself. There's so much more homework that you are capable of doing before you approach anything. If you do a little bit of digging into the rabbit hole with some AI, I think that's really where the value. I don't want to get too deep into this, but I do really think that's where the value is with AI, and like the era that we're heading towards, where people will be able to equip themselves with like much closer to expert level knowledge than they would be just trying to figure it out by themselves, before they get into the situation of, like, let's say, you're paying this lawyer for their time, and you can do yourself a huge favor by doing, leveraging the AI to like do a better job of doing your homework. And I hope that made sense. Okay, great. So we dove a little bit deeper. This has been really interesting. Are we doing a mental health business moment this week?
Yeah, and for our listeners, I usually do a little brain search before the podcasts. I didn't do one, but what I will say is that we've hit, and Parker, you did do a plea for more positive mental health business moments
I did.
recently.
I did.
So whether this is positive or not, well, It is business positive, which is our clinic is now reaching the threshold of the demand for services is far beyond what we can do. The good news is that we did add another clinician, and it is this point where then it opens the door nicely to post jobs and be secure that you have clients for the new patients. I think the downside is it is hard to tell people you don't have room to help them. And so that is, as we've hinted to, running the successful business piece with this wanting to help people. It's tough, and it's why I think a lot of it is why we're doing a lot of this to help people with the business piece. And right, the best way you can help more people is by running a very good, successful business. It's not fair that 10 families a week can't get access to mental health care. So that is my business health moment of the week.
Okay, I feel like you made an attempt at being positive. But
I did, and then I got so it was the whole the whole reason we're sorry. Oh. Great news. No, we can't serve all the people suffering. We're like, the clinic is full. Anyway.
Yeah, it's like good news and bad news at the same time. Yeah. Well, I mean, I have no doubt in your ability to figure it out and send those who you're not able to fit in along the right, send them on the right path to finding the right kind of provider. Okay, Tom, this has been an episode. I'm going to say this is it for this week's episode of the Sit and Stay podcast, brought to you by RipsyTech. If you enjoyed the episode, sure hope you did. We would love a rating or review wherever you are listening. I actually recently saw that people have been rating us on Apple Podcasts, and I had no idea. I found that out today. So keep doing that. We love it. We love to see that. I'm sure Tom just lit up a little bit as I said that. So if you want to light up Tom's world a little bit more, please leave some nice comments or ratings or reviews wherever you are listening. And if you'd like to get in touch, you can email us at sitandstay@ripsytech.com, and we will see you next time. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Parker.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Sit and Stay podcast. Until we meet again, we invite you to sit and stay with the ideas and stories shared today. Dive deeper into how RipsyTech can support your practice by visiting us at RipsyTech.com.